Hello and welcome to another episode of the Smaulgld Subscribers Sound Off series. Today I have with me a new guest, but not an unknown guest, Wealth Watchman. Wealth Watchman made a name for himself in the silver area with many fine YouTube videos on the subject matter. And today we're delighted to have him with us for the first time. We're going to talk about silver and whatever else comes to mind. Wealth Watchman, welcome to the Smaulgld Subscriber Sound Off series. How are you doing today?
I am doing fantastic, Lewis. Thank you for having me. Enjoy your show and your work, and pleasure to be here.
Well, it's good to have you. Now, I want to get right in and talk about your background. And for people, a lot of people who follow your work probably have always wondered why you started the channel, how you started the channel, how you developed it, what you're doing now, and take it away and let us know what was the impetus to start the Wealth Watchman channel, focusing pretty much exclusively in the beginning on silver.
Sure. Well, back in 2008, during the crisis, I knew some of the things that I know now, but I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know exactly how bad it was. And once I discovered more about the criminality of the monetary system, the currency system, the banking system, and how everything else in the financial arena and political arena really ties into the corruptness of how that works. I focused on, okay, well, what is true? Okay, what is something that I can trust? What is something that I can depend upon? And so I started digging into ancient, bygone truths of yesteryear, and that led me to studying sounder money. Historically, gold and silver were trusted around the world, and the ancient coins made by the ancient governments, they're still valuable today, even if they were melted down. They would still be valuable because what they are made is objectively valuable asset that is timeless in a very real sense. So once I understood that, I started really branching out, really digging deep into the media aspect of it, and said, man, I've got to get these truths out there for others. I want to be able to save a lot of these people some time, the time that I wasn't given. I had to find out this stuff out over years on my own. I want as many people as possible to know this right away. So I set up my website, thewealthwatchman.com, I believe in 2014, late 2013, early 2014, and I wrote several years very intensely, very extensively there on gold and silver, of course, but also geopolitical events, other monetary and banking aspects, and it's really evolved more over time. It encompasses more my coverage from cultural events, ideas, to the monetary aspect, to politics. And so I wanted to do it a different way. I didn't want it just to be clinical. I wanted there to be some real flavor that made it very interesting. And so that's what I've been doing the last several years, a little less in the last few months, but hopefully back in a place where I can start to do this a little bit more often than I have been for the last 6 to 8 months.
Oh, excellent. Now, one of the things I noted right away, it's almost like you didn't build up to it or need a lot of practice. You had the storytelling skills down pat. So your videos would come out, they'd be highly anticipated, and they'd catch you with a hook, and you'd have an image, and then you'd create visual images through your words. Where did you develop that? Are you a natural, or was there some type of build-up before you started making videos? Because from the very first videos, they all had a quality of a master storyteller, and that's why you picked up a big audience right away. Where does that come from?
Thanks, Lewis. I think it probably stems from the way I was raised. My family, my father did a lot of public speaking. He has spoken in front of many crowds and audiences, and I watched him do it, and it inspired me. And he gave me my love of history. He gave me my love of culture, and really imbued me with a sense of it's not just what you're saying. It's how you say it that can make all the difference sometimes between that truth really sticking, really hitting home, and being totally forgotten, totally misunderstood. So early on, I wanted to give equal parts style and substance to what I do. And a lot of people want to stand out in their own way in what they do. That's the way I wanted to stand out. I wanted to, as you said, I want to craft, a narrative around the truths that I'm hoping to communicate in a way that is interesting, that is engaging, because the way we do things and say things matters, not just what we do and say, but the way we do that. And so hopefully I've been able to make it interesting, make it fun, and help inform others. I appreciate the kind words.
Well, and the way I look at it is, when I say storytelling, I don't mean fabrication. I mean storytelling in the
Right.
in the Homeric tradition, because what I see a lot of, and it's not storytelling, I see a lot of hype in this space. People inventing a story, so to speak, or a narrative, and basically focusing on only the part that might fit the point that they're trying to make, that silver is set to skyrocket or gold is set to skyrocket, or this event is the biggest event ever. And your stories, while they had drama in them, they were always factually based. So how did you start with silver? What was the attraction to silver? I know you mentioned history, but what specifically about silver? Why not gold? Why not platinum, palladium, oil, diamonds? What attracted you to silver?
I think what attracted me to silver was the fact that for so many thousands of years, it was the go-to currency, if you will, the go-to asset for the everyman. I know the very poorest would use copper or bronze, and that is true. But if you wanted to, even as a poor working class serf, if you started accumulating just a little bit of wealth, a little bit of savings, you would move it out of your bronze, you would move it out of the copper, and you would get a silver coin or two. And for thousands of years, that's the way it was. What drew me to silver is I looked at the silver story and said, when did that stop? Well, when did that begin to stop? Why did it begin to stop? Was this natural? Was this a natural event in history? Was this pre-prepared? Was this in someone's interest to stop, to roll out silver as a mechanism of exchange and savings and roll in something else? And the conclusions that I quickly came to were pretty troubling. I did conclude that silver had not gone away quietly and naturally. It had been ushered out pretty almost instantaneously. But by instantaneously, I mean a couple of decades. I mean, when you're trying to wean people, the nations, off of using silver as currency and exchange when they've used it for thousands of years, it will take a little while to condition a populace that's so used to doing one thing to do whatever you want them to do. And the money masters, the banksters, the powers that are in Europe and elsewhere, they had it in their best interest, but not the people's interest, to wean them off silver, because they thought it gave them more centralized control and power over the everyman by corralling him into a medium of exchange that they could control more easily. And once I discovered that, I realized several things. One, the price of silver, it's around roughly $16.50 today. The price of silver is completely artificial in the historic sense. It's out of sync with the historicity of where it was for thousands of years.
And that's because they removed the monetary backing, or using it as a monetary metal. There's a lesser demand, in a sense.
Yes.
If you're not going to make
that's
coins
right.
out of it, then there's less demand for it.
Precisely. That's right. So, and that process that you just described took almost 100 years to do. It began in the 1860s, 70s with the acts that the lobbyists from Great Britain basically convinced President Grant to sign. basically demonetizing, well, in a sense, demonetizing silver. Silver was still coinage, but it no longer had to be kept at a ratio, and certain parties were not any longer forced to accept it in and of itself. If banks wanted to demand gold, that was their right, and you were up, the creek without a paddle if you didn't have gold when they made that decision, and that was the point. And that process started in the 1870s. And as you have noted well before, it really kind of ended in the 60s, in the 1960s, with President Kennedy and those who came after him, who basically finished the job that the demonetization of the 1870s began. So it was a long process in our view. But when you look at it, over the last 40, 50 centuries, 100 years to change that whole picture is not that long at all. And so once I realized what had been done to us, that this wasn't natural, this wasn't a natural, market thing, that this was prearranged, preordained, and not with our good in mind, I realized that perhaps there was a big vulnerability to these controllers through this very small silver market compared to many other markets. Mm-hmm. And the other thing I realized is that if a tiny portion of people on Earth just started using silver for savings again, or just, bought the real deal, the real physical specie, the coin, for even a small part of their net worth, then we would start to see a silver price perhaps quickly that better reflected the historical valuations. And once I realized that, I started putting all my energies into that, and that's what brought me to this point today.
That makes sense. And listening to you reminded me when they made the changeover to silver in the United States, from silver to a copper nickel clad type coin. One of the sinister things they did to do the bait and switch, as I recall now, they did not change the design at all. So the idea was, well, yeah, that's a quarter with about 25 cents worth of silver in it. And this new one here, well, it says 25 cents on it, just like the other one. And to most people, they really didn't miss a trick, and they were tricked. That
you're right.
This is a quarter, that's a quarter. Now, the smart people, or not necessarily they were geniuses or had high IQs, they saw the difference, and they pulled those coins out of circulation, and they were gone, showing that that's the old, good money. What was it? Good money drives out bad, or is it? Bad money drives out good. Yes,
that's right.
Because the copper-clad coins drove out all the silver coins. People didn't save them. Now, you mentioned that one of your you went from being a passive historical reader almost to an activist, because basically what you're saying is you then saw that there was an opportunity here, that if there was some awareness, and again, just like there were few people that were pulling the coins out of circulation, those few people had an impact because they removed all the silver coins. I guess you were thinking similarly that if people were to start to reacquire the silver, it might have a similar effect. And we saw about the time you started in 2014, there really was a movement picking up in terms of individuals in the United States and Europe and other parts of the world actually buying silver metal, physical metal, because physical metal in, I think, 2005, coins, rounds, bars, according to the Silver Institute, was only about 5% of overall demand. As we move through the 2012, 13, 14, 15 period, we saw increasing amounts of sales of American Silver Eagles from 15 million to 28 million to 38 million to 40 million to 47 million at the peak in 2015. We saw the same thing, the Canadian Mint going from a couple of million in 2005 up to 40 million in 2015. And it seemed for a moment there, as the price was dropping too, that there really was a big movement into, not by the masses, but by a significant number of people buying the silver. And those numbers were were continuing to rise. They
Yes.
were strong in early 2016, and then, Mr. Watchman, what happened?
Well, after many years, I would say almost a decade of straight price advances in silver, coupled with mostly straight increases in demand, there was a huge orchestrated, well, a popular term in the stacking community is massacre, the May Day massacre, which started in 2011 but was repeated over and over and over again. And in 2013, after a meeting between President Obama and most of the big Wall Street banks, there was another coordinated, COMEX contract dump, which pushed gold through the very important, I think it was 1525 level,
The resistance.
and silver through the 26 level. Silver had held $26 as an important low for about, I don't know, over a year, and it had bounced off of it several times. And once 26 was breached, we hit 22 and 18 and 16, and eventually 14. The 14s were briefly hit. And when that happened, and they were able to get silver down into a trading range that they were more comfortable with, the I guess the fire and the passion in some of the stacking community's eyes was dimmed. They realized this fight against these people was going to be a lot tougher than they anticipated. That we were right about silver being, the everyman's wealth historically. We were right about the banksters, who they are, what they're doing, but had really shortchanged them in a sense, thinking that we were just going to fly, straight to $100 or $500 silver without without a hell of a fight. And these people were not willing and ready to allow that to happen, and they really pulled out all the stops. And since that point, silver has really struggled to pick up momentum. The momentum is quashed very quickly. And the only exception to that was back, I think, I don't know, was it 2015, 2016 during Brexit? Right around
Yes.
the Brexit vote. Yeah.
In the run up, March, April, May, June of 2016.
Okay, so yes, 2016. So during that time, Brexit caught a lot of people, a lot of the banks, a lot of market participants by surprise, and there was kind of a short-lived mad dash into the paper market in silver, drove it back up from 15, 16 to $21 and change, which is a very important area of resistance that we hit back in 2007, 2008, but when Jamie Dimon's group took it from, $21 to $8. So that is an important psychological barrier. I think stackers should be, they should not get their hopes up right now. What they should do is keep their eye on the prize and start to get excited if they can see silver break $21 with some authority. If they see that, then I would allow myself to get excited again, because from there, it's not a very quick trip. It's not a very, it's $26 is right there, 100 meters down the road. There's not a lot of, there's just dead air. There's just space between one resistance point and another.
So it looks like then they discouraged the physical buying really by demoralizing.
They really did.
But let me ask you, during that time period, let's get your thoughts on how cryptocurrencies tied in. That's when cryptocurrencies got their second wind. Cryptocurrencies exploded at the end of 2013 up to $1,000 an ounce, and then they were in the wilderness, 2014, 15, and people like myself were saying, well, that was nice, it was 1,000, now it's headed back to where it should be, couple of bucks, and it really fell down to $300-400, stayed there, and then it started to catch fire again. Do you think that the crypto scene pulled some of the investable dollars, some of the enthusiasm away from the precious metals?
Yes, 100%. There's no doubt in my mind that that's part of what's happened. And while it's frustrating on one hand, And I allowed myself, I'd say, 4 or 5 years ago, to be a little frustrated by it. But then I did something that I didn't expect, and I was glad that I did this. Instead of being frustrated about it, instead of fighting it, I just said, look, I don't believe whatever else Bitcoin is, I don't believe this is a centrally controlled thing. I don't believe that the power brokers like this asset. I don't believe that the banks control this asset, and I stated why. Then when I understood that, I said, look, I just want to beat these guys. I just want these banks to go down in flames. I don't really care if silver is the first, the ICBM that hits them. I just want I just want the vampire squids of the world, the J.P. Morgans of the world, the Blythe Masters of the world. I want them to fear for their careers, their futures, and their well-beings, by a new challenger destroying their monopoly on money and credit. And I think that we as stackers should be open to any and all others strategies of assaulting these people, because whether you're a coiner, whether you're in the crypto community, or whether you're a stacker, or whether you're both like me, we have the same enemies. These banks are the enemies of us all, and silver and gold, these banks have had 150 years to get really good at rigging gold and silver, but these cryptos are so new, they haven't had time to adapt to them. And the few things that they have tried are only the kinds of things that can buy them time, because they know that they cannot keep bribing mining companies to pull their metal out of the ground for nothing. Because when all the Bitcoin are mined, they're mined. When all the Litecoin are mined, they're mined. There's not this, this supply that's going to keep happening. After the next 15, 20 years, most of the coins that are ever going to exist are here. So it really becomes a mad dash right now, I think, in a real sense, for the coins that are there, and how these banks are going to deal with this upstart challenge from the crypto community. Because I'll be honest with you, while I was, in 2013, I did not own Bitcoin. And when it spiked to 1,000, I just couldn't believe it. But now I got back, I bought some Bitcoin and some cryptos back in the spring of 2016. I think I bought Bitcoin at $500 or just a little under. And look at it where it is right now. And I have made, and I've still got my silver. I've got a lot of silver. But I decided at that point that I would put a bet on both racehorses. And I told myself, let the best horse win. I don't really care in the short run who breaks out first. I want an escape from this monetary prison they have tried to put us in. And I don't care which strategy succeeds first, because, and that's something else I'm going to make a video about soon.
Oh, good.
That stackers should welcome the success of the crypto community, even if they don't own any or plan on owning any, because once one challenger to this monetary system achieves true escape velocity, truly escapes their system, and with hundreds of billions and even trillions of dollars, that's it. Their success will pave the way for stackers' success. I guarantee you that is going to happen.
So one of the things that I was like most people who saw the financial crisis 2018 and said, okay, well, this problem is basically a debt problem, and then they're trying to solve it by printing money, buying bad assets with money that they print. And clearly you say to yourself, well, the things that matter are going to be hard assets, and that's what leads you to gold, silver, real estate, just things that you can hold in your hand, things that aren't based on a promise of somebody else. And to me, Bitcoin wasn't that. Bitcoin was another digital asset that I figured they could, you can make Bitcoin and you can make something else. And once you had the open source code, there was nothing stopping you from making more and more. And I thought, good luck with that. That's not going to happen. Now, what I did see happen over the last 3 or 4 years is, while you can make an infinite number of cryptocurrencies, you need the infrastructure, and you need the buy-in, and you need the history of the blockchain. You just can't. You and I can start a cryptocurrency and call it Wealthman Coin and good luck. It's not going to go anywhere. It might, but I doubt it. But what really convinced me, and this was my big awakening, not awakening to Bitcoin, but in general, is that my opinion on all this really doesn't matter. And a lot of people, they take their opinion and they're convinced Bitcoin is a scam or whatever it is. They convince themselves and they're not hedged against their own confirmation bias. And I think that's the danger when people, once they decide it's only silver or it's only gold or it's only Bitcoin or it's not only anything. I had a
Right.
subscriber on Ann Renf, and he was saying the best thing to do is to catch the wave in the Bitcoin if you're smart enough, you're lucky enough to get in early, and then you can convert more into your silver and gold and deplete the stocks of the silver and gold that way. But there are
That's
people
exactly
out there.
right.
They are convinced.
That's exactly right.
They are convinced, Watchman, that there's no good to come from cryptocurrencies whatsoever. What do you say to that?
Well, most of them are grown adults. They have to make up their own mind. Some people will just never take that leap. They will never have that aha moment, where they believe cryptos are okay to own, cryptos are a decent asset to own, that cryptos are not, a secret plot from a handful of people at Langley to steal everything they own. Because I know some people in the staking community believe that. Look, I'm not here to defame them. I'm not here to assault their character. That's their belief. That's fine. I don't believe that. And once I understood more about how cryptos worked and what they were, I told myself I was like, Watchman, it would be very foolish to not have a seat on this train, just in case it starts moving, just in case it starts leaving the station before the silver train does. I said whichever train leaves first, you can just hop on that. You can ride it. You can make fiat with it. You can make some Benny bucks with it, as we used to say. Some whatever currency you want. And as you say, you can leverage that. I decided to leverage that. And here's what I realized, Lewis. Here's an important question that I want all stackers listening to you right now to ask themselves. We stackers have gotten so much right in our analysis about precious metals. But what we got wrong, the thing we did not see coming, is how drawn out these bankers can make this process of silver and gold breaking free from their control, how long they can make that last. Back in 2011, we thought we were going to, I thought it was possible that year to see triple digit silver, and perhaps it would have been. I think it would have been possible to see $100 silver in 2011 if what they did hadn't been done, or $5,000 gold. But it didn't happen. They've done this for 7 years. We're in a new trading range. And I think a lot of stackers should ask themselves this question. Are you hedged? See, against the rigging of gold and silver? Please ask yourself. This is a question I've never heard a stacker ask themselves. Okay, so here's to us, silver and gold were the hedge. They were the hedge against uncertainty. They were the hedge against market rigging. And that's true. They are. But the one thing that you cannot hedge gold and silver against in most cases is the rigging of silver itself. You can't hedge that with silver unless you just buy a bunch of numismatic coins, which some friends of mine have. I know that a great guy, I really love him, Brother John F., a lot of his silver is semi-numismatics that were smartly chosen, that have good collector's value, and that he could sell it for a collector's markup, and that's fine. But not everyone is able to do that, intelligently pick the winners as he does. Not everyone can do that. So the question is, are you prepared if they rig this at $17 for another 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years before silver sees freedom? Are you prepared to ride that out now and lose 3, 5, or 10 years and just be okay with it in hindsight.
After you've lost 3 or 5 years prior.
That's right. After you've already lost 3 to 5 years before this, are you prepared to do that another 3 to 5? Or do you want to pick out a way to hopefully achieve success somewhere else if the rigging continues longer than you anticipated? This is the question. This is the soul-searching question that every stacker has to ask, because I'll tell you, the opportunity costs over the last 5 years in PMs over other things has been absolutely extraordinary. And I'll give you an example.
The worst in silver.
It's been very bad.
Gold hasn't been that bad. You haven't really lost anything if you bought every year. The last 5 years, you're in the average 13. It's flat. But silver, you've actually lost fiat value.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And look, I'm a stacker and I own cryptos. I'm a firm believer in where silver will eventually go. But I don't have that crystal ball, and I'm not going to pretend that every new headline means that we're about to break out. We're about to break out any moment now, any moment. That's a way to make yourself miserable and to miss out on all kinds of other opportunities while you're waiting for silver to break out. I decided to make hay somewhere else. I decided to add a position in something else while I was waiting. I told myself, okay, this was back when Bitcoin was $500. I came across a little bit of cash, okay, a little bit of cash. I told myself, okay, I can either buy X, ounces of silver, or I can buy Bitcoin with it. And I don't have any Bitcoin, but I have lots of silver. In fact, I had met my dream threshold in silver. I have all the silver at that point that I wanted to own. I'd met all my stacking goals, but I didn't have Bitcoin. So I told myself, if Bitcoin takes off, then I want to have some. So I did, and that was one of the best financial decisions of my life. I've made so much cash on that initial investment of Bitcoin at roughly $500-$600 in just the next 18 months.
Right.
like last Christmas. Within 18 months, I had made literally a life-changing sum of cash on this small investment.
And I remember you telling me this. I'm like, and I had the same view. A lot of people still have it. I don't have it anymore. When I was listening to you telling me on Twitter you were doing this, and I thought, you're kind of betraying the whole silver thing there. That's how I looked at it. And that's how some people still look at it, that it's and then I realized, am I in a cult? Is it like you can't look beyond an asset class, and that you're married to an asset class, and that you can only see this asset class? And I was thinking, because a lot of the reason that people buy anything, no matter what they say, is they want fiat profits.
Right.
Because they do look at the price of gold and silver. They may say, "Oh, measure your wealth in ounces." Why? You're not going to spend ounces. You're not going to buy anything with ounces. You're going to buy stuff with fiat profits. And the name of the game for anybody who's investing or getting a job is how much, quote, money can you make? Oh, it's not money, it's currency. Well, forget the semantics. People call it money, and only gold is money. No, people spend is money. That's how I look at it. And people were starting to spend Bitcoin. Now, what's interesting, they're not spending Bitcoin anymore. I just saw a story today, maybe you saw it. They have these vaults and where these rich people store billions and billions of dollars in cold storage. And I just think they're guarding nothing, and they're guarding digits. But the fact that those people actually have it in their mind that there's value there, and they know it's liquid, they can pull that Bitcoin out of cold storage, however they do that, and go and sell it and make fiat and buy stuff with it. So that's what convinced me that it's not fake money, because all money other than a physical species is fake. But can you buy real stuff with it? And absolutely you can.
Absolutely.
So where do you see now? Now, the other thing I want to talk about India before I let you go, and ETFs, because I'm seeing demand in both. I'm seeing investor demand in ETFs, which is not a physical product, but I'm starting to see physical demand pick up more so in silver than in gold. Although the gold demand is relatively robust in India. How do you
Yes.
factor in what's happening in the paper markets, meaning the big uptake in ETFs while there's not much of an uptake at all in physical buying at the mints, and then the big uptake again now in Indian silver demand?
Well, those are really great questions. I think as far as the ETF question goes, yeah, I know not all ETFs are created equal. I mean, we both know that they have different, you know, they have different ways and means of doing business, different stewards, different custodians. But we can't ignore what happens at the ETFs. Yes, I believe on some level there is some finagling, probably at some of the bullion ETFs with things. We've seen it when they've tried to do that TV piece several years ago, and they grabbed a bar.
With the different numbers, right?
Yeah, different numbers. They weren't even part of the same ETF. But that's true. But we can't ignore it because it's too big of a giant in the room. It's too big of an elephant. So if you can't get the full picture on gold or silver action if you don't take ETFs into consideration. It has to be so. So yes, it is good that there is a greater uptake in ETF demand in silver. In gold. When that happens, on the whole, I would call that a very positive thing. But I would definitely call the uptake in silver demand in India that we are seeing over the last 14 months or so a very positive development. Now, some of my longtime subscribers, a lot of my Shield brothers, have been saying, "Watchman, I don't understand why you haven't done a video on silver in like over a year. I haven't heard you talk about it at all." And my very honest answer to this question is I want to talk about it, but I won't do that until I see a change in the wind. I'm not going to latch on to every headline and say silver's about to break out any minute. There's going to be a COMEX default. There's going to be some sovereign country, secretly laying the groundwork for a silver standard or for a bimetallic standard or a basket of commodity standard. I'm not. That's not what I'm going to do. I see too many people doing that. I see really good people getting their hopes up and then they're crushed. The only thing that helped free silver from 2004 to 2011 was physical demand, investment demand, growing so large that it overwhelmed the very tiny window, the very tiny margin of silver they could afford to lose every year and still give it to everyone who wanted it at that market price. Investment demand really is the key here. I remember, several years ago, they said, photovoltaic demand, solar demand for silver is 40 million ounces, but by 2020, it could be 100 million. That'll be a game changer. Well, we just almost hit 100 million right now. And look where silver is. It's nowhere. Solar demand is important. It's part of the puzzle, but it's not
yoga
enough.
pants. It's yoga pants. That's
right.
That's what's going to drive silver. I hear all these people all the time. They talk about they're finding new uses all the time. And I'm like, yeah, for 300 ounces a year. I mean, you have to look at the numbers. Like you say, solar, big deal, 100 million ounces. It's not going to move the needle enough. It really has to be so significant. And you're saying that demand has to come from investment in big numbers.
That's exactly right. And this is the key, because of the success of cryptos and of the price beatdowns, the stacking community that existed, up until that point and still exists today, is not enough in the West to move the needle. What will move the needle is India. And you put out a great piece several days ago on your website, smaulgld.com, on the first 2 months of silver demand in India for 2018. Really good piece. People should go there and read it. The reason why it's great is because last year I saw a bit of a downturn in silver, in silver demand in like 20, I think it was 2015, 2016. Like, I think silver demand peaked in 2015 with like 8,500 tons or whatever. And at that point, I made a YouTube video and I said, I'm calling it, guys. this is going to be the silver record in India for years. And so far, that's what's happened. Now, the follow-on year, the next year, 2016, it was a major disappointment. I think they were down to, I don't know, 3,500 tons. It was like 5,000 tons less of silver demand. And when I saw weak silver demand in India in 2016, I told myself, we're not anywhere close to a breakout. A breakout is not going to happen because the market is not tight. And the market's not tight because India is not buying. So because 5,000 tons is another 170, 180 million ounces of silver for these criminals to slush around with. That's all they need. That's more than they need. They really only need, I would calculate, about 100 million or so extra ounces a year or less. And so this gave them more than what they needed to play games with. But the next year, in 2017, demand shot back up. It shot back up several thousand tons. I think it was well over 5,000. Is that correct? I think it's over 5,000 tons.
5,398, almost 5,400 tons, right?
That's right. Absolutely. So what that proved to me in 2017 is the silver surge, the huge epic buying of silver by common Indians in India ever since 2013, that was not an outlier. That was not a one-off. The fact that it bounced back from that low and came back to the fourth highest level of silver buying ever in India demonstrated to me that this is now becoming a new part of Indian habit, of Indian consciousness, of saying, well, the government imports on gold are still too high. The taxes on gold are still too high, and the price of gold is still fairly high. Mm-hmm. But I could get all this silver for a fraction of the price. And more and more people are starting to do that. It's really becoming a long-term habit. That is key, and that's really going to help us in the silver community going forward.
Well, the thing that you mentioned about silver bouncing back to the fourth best year ever last year in 2017, the first couple of months of 2018 are 67% better than 2017. So we could be heading not quite to 2015 levels, at least not yet, but could be the second largest amount. And a lot of people also focus on, I don't know how much attention you pay to it, are the annual mining numbers. Now, I don't pay much attention to the gold annual mining numbers because they really only add single-digit percentage to the overall stocks of gold, and a lot of that gold ends up going directly to jewelry manufacturers, and yes. I don't think that's a big deal. Now, silver is a little harder to figure out because some people like to claim, and I'm one of them, that silver appears to be a just-in-time commodity. It gets mined, it gets sent out, and it gets used, and we don't really see, we're not aware of central banks hoarding silver the way there's thousands of tons of gold in the central banks. Exactly. We know that there's ETF hoards. We know that there's J.P. Morgan's COMEX vault hoard. We know there's some hoard at the Shanghai Gold Exchange. But we're not really aware of any particular hoards. However, my understanding, though, is in draws across the world, in India, China, the United States, all over the world, there are insignificant amounts. Someone might have 10 ounces, this 20, but that it's a real significant amount of silver that's out there that won't come to market at these prices, but
yes,
will come to market if the price starts to rise. But if the price doesn't rise, then the silver does kind of get consumed. So are you saying that we really need to see India is going to be the demand that's going to start to push the supply-demand dynamic out of balance and into a point where the price is going to have to rise because we're not going to get more silver production unless the price rises, and we're not going to get that secondary silver and all those millions of drawers until we start to see not a shortage, but as you said, some tightness. Is that correct?
That's right. And I think we will if the trend in India continues. If we do have a really positive year, we're off to a great start, as you said, 882 tons, nearly 1,000 tons of silver in the first 2 months. So annualized, we're already on track to do better than the previous year. And if we get back to those numbers, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000, when you start getting back there and you couple that with flat or slightly declining silver supply over the last couple of years. I'm not saying we've hit permanent peak silver. I'm saying that in the moment, those numbers matter.
Right.
And especially if you couple it with the numbers we're seeing out of India. So because and you remember me saying this back in 2015, silver almost broke out again because it got very, very, very tight. Probably the tightest it had been in 2 or 3 years. And the reason that happened is because of India. 8,500 tons. I mean, it was like 300 million ounces of silver that year. And I think roughly a billion ounces, a billion ounce supply, that's 30% of all silver went to India.
And we also had at the time, if you remember, across the sovereign mints and the rounds and the privately minted bars, over 220, 240 million ounces.
True.
And that's come down in the last 2 years about 60, 70%. So we have.
Yes.
So, Mr. Watchman, what we're going to do now is we're going to wrap it up, but we're going to continue to watch the Indian numbers. We'll have you back on to get your point of view, I hope, in a couple of months to see the progress we might be making in India or in other areas. How's that sound?
I would absolutely love that, Lewis. Thank you for having me on. Loved our discussion. And to all the stackers out there, don't fear the crypto scene. And to the crypto people, don't get cocky. If you have cryptos, great. Hey, congratulations. Feel good. But it's not the only asset class out there that's of any significance that our bankers are paying attention to. You should be allies and friends with the stacking community and vice versa. Together, we will beat these people together.
All right. Can you tell our listeners where they can follow you before, if they don't want to wait another couple of months to hear you on Smaulgld?
Yeah, the website is thewealthwatchman.com. My YouTube channel is Wealth Watchman. And my YouTube audience, I will be sending out hopefully another video in the near future about some more thoughts on precious metals and cryptocurrencies as well as other things. So do appreciate your time, Lewis, and thank you again, and keep stacking and coining, you guys.
All right. Thank you very much, Wealth Watchman. We'll talk to you soon.
Take care.